Sometimes life
Son, what
strips
is it?
everything away before revealing the one thing that truly matters. For Eli Morrison, a single father raising his 10-year-old son Leo, that moment came when the bank repossessed their home. Standing in the yard with an eviction notice in his hand, Eli felt helpless while his little boy tried to smile through the heartbreak. Jobs had dried up after the lumber mill shut down, bills piled higher than the paychecks, and grief from the loss of Sarah, Leo's mother, still lingered like an open wound. To escape the crushing weight of failure, Eli loaded up their old truck with camping gear and drove into the northern woods, the same place his own father once taught him about fishing, bird calls, and the quiet wisdom of the trees. Eli told himself they needed a week to breathe, to heal, to think about what came next. But deep down, he had no answers left. Then, 3 days into their trip, Leo stumbled on something hidden in the forest, an abandoned train swallowed by vines and time. Inside, they discovered something that would shatter everything they thought they knew about their family, their future, and even history itself. $11 million in forgotten bonds, journals from families fleeing wartime terror, and secrets that had waited 80 years to be found. What Eli and Leo uncovered was more than treasure, it was a legacy. But the real question was, would this discovery save them or destroy them? Eli's downfall hadn't happened overnight. For 12 years, 3 months, and 16 days, he worked at Clearwater Lumber Mill, his gloves smelling of pine, his son's drawings tucked inside his hard hat like good luck charms. That routine ended with one meeting where his boss, Carl, couldn't meet his eyes. Automation, budget cuts, the words felt sterile compared to the gut punch they delivered. Eli walked out with a severance check and no plan. At home, Leo was still celebrating an A on his school project about trees, blissfully unaware that their family's stability was hanging by a thread. 2 years earlier, Sarah's sudden death had left Eli reeling, and now it seemed the universe was taking the little he had left. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept help from Sarah's brother Mike, a successful lawyer who kept offering. But pride doesn't pay mortgages. Within months, eviction papers were taped to their front door. Eli tried to shield Leo from the harsh truth, but the boy had already overheard enough to know. "Even if we lost our house, would we still be a family?" he asked one night over macaroni and cheese. That question cracked Eli's heart wide open. He had no job, no home, and no answers. But what he did have was a memory of camping with his own father, and maybe, just maybe, nature could remind them what really mattered. So he packed the tent, the stove, and the sleeping bags that still smelled faintly of wood smoke, and together they drove toward the unknown. At first, the forest felt like freedom. The further they drove, the lighter Eli's chest became. Cell reception faded, but so did creditor calls. The mountains opened before them like a second chance, with rolling green ridges and air so crisp it felt like medicine. Leo pressed his face to the truck window, sketchbook in his lap, already drawing the waitress at a roadside diner and the waterfall Eli had promised to show him. When they finally reached the campsite, it was as if time had paused. Just a clearing by a stream, fire rings made from river stones and tall pines blocking out the sky. They set up camp, cooked hot dogs over a crackling fire, and for one brief evening the world felt safe. Under the stars, Leo asked about constellations, his voice full of wonder, and Eli realized this trip wasn't just an escape. It was a chance to give his son the one thing he could still offer: time, stories, and love. But on the third morning, Leo woke early, restless, sensing something deeper in the woods. "Let's explore further," he said with a spark in his eyes. Eli followed reluctantly, unaware that his son's instincts were leading them to a secret hidden for generations. What they were about to find would tie their family to strangers they'd never met, and to a forgotten chapter of history almost erased from memory. The mist was thick when Eli realized Leo had wandered ahead, leaving behind sketches as breadcrumbs, drawings of deer, squirrels, and finally something stranger, a long, vine-covered shape with windows. Eli pushed through a gap between boulders and stepped into a hidden clearing that stole his breath. There, resting silently as though waiting, was an old passenger train. Not a rusted hulk, but an elegant relic with brass fixtures, velvet seats, and luggage racks frozen in time. Inside, Leo was already sitting cross-legged, surrounded by books, newspapers from 1943, and journals filled with the voices of desperate families. One journal belonged to Sarah Chen, a mother fleeing with her children during World War II, recording her fears and her faith in the Aurora Express, the name engraved on the brass plate above the windows. In a hidden compartment beneath the floor, Leo had uncovered stacks of U.S. Treasury bonds, bearer bonds worth $11 million if still valid. Eli's hands trembled as he held them. Their money problems could vanish overnight. But this wasn't simple treasure. It was the life savings of families who had trusted a conductor named Thomas Walsh to keep them safe. Families who never came back. What right did he and Leo have to take it? Still, their discovery had only begun to reveal its secrets. That night by firelight, they pored over passenger journals and documents. Each entry painted a picture of families escaping internment, prejudice, or political persecution, boarding this secret train to reach hidden mountain communities. The Aurora Express was more than transportation. It was a lifeline, an underground railroad on American soil. Thomas Walsh, the conductor, wasn't just a man in uniform. He was the architect of a secret network that kept people alive and hidden when their country turned against them. Among the journals was one from Sarah Chen, whose descendants seemed to lead directly to Leo's own school librarian. But the greatest shock came when Eli found a file labeled Morrison family. Photographs from 1943 showed a couple with children who looked eerily familiar. Names on adoption records connected Eli's own father to this network, and even revealed that his late wife, Sarah, had roots in this hidden history. Suddenly, it wasn't just about found money. Eli and Leo weren't outsiders who had stumbled on someone else's story. They were the story. The bonds weren't just abandoned wealth. They were an inheritance left behind for descendants who might one day return. The past was reaching out, and Eli's family was at its center. But not everything about the discovery felt safe. The forest around them seemed alive, shifting paths, concealing trails, and keeping them close to the clearing. Their truck mysteriously refused to start. At night, Eli heard footsteps circling their camp, whispers carried by the wind, and the feeling of unseen eyes watching. One morning, Leo uncovered the conductor's private quarters inside the train, still preserved, with notebooks that tracked weather patterns, wildlife, and visitors. One entry described a father and son arriving, dated 3 days earlier. Someone had been monitoring them. That fear crystallized when an older man with silver hair appeared in the doorway, introducing himself calmly. Marcus Walsh, grandson of Thomas Walsh. He explained he had been the guardian of the Aurora Express since his grandfather's death, protecting it from treasure hunters and vandals. The forest, he claimed, had ways of revealing itself only to those who truly needed it. And Eli's family, with their roots tangled in this legacy, had been chosen. Marcus declared the Aurora Express, its documents, and even the bearer bonds now belonged to Eli and Leo. But beneath his kind smile, Eli sensed another truth. The responsibility wasn't just a gift, it was a burden that would test them both. In the days that followed, Marcus shared letters, photographs, and records that stitched together a hidden genealogy spanning decades. Eli's father had once been a boy on this very train, renamed and relocated to protect him. His wife, Sarah, too, had unknowingly carried the bloodline of this story through adoption records and hidden connections. Eli and Leo realized they weren't just inheritors of wealth. They were inheritors of a duty to honor the trust of the families who had sacrificed everything. As they read letters from survivors describing their struggles, their hopes, and their gratitude toward Thomas Walsh, Eli felt his perspective shift. This wasn't about money, it was about restoring dignity to lives erased by history. But shadows still lingered. The forest had kept them in place for a reason, and whispers in the night suggested they weren't alone. Other eyes, less benevolent than Marcus's, had been waiting too. Eli understood then that some legacies come with enemies as well as blessings, and protecting Leo would require more than courage. It would require choosing what kind of man he wanted to be. One who clung to survival, or one who carried forward the spirit of sacrifice and justice that had created the Aurora Express. As dawn broke over the clearing, Eli sat with Leo on the train's steps, the bonds and journals resting between them like a bridge to the past. His son, wise beyond his 10 years, asked the question that cut straight to the heart of it. "Dad, what kind of men do we want to be?" Eli didn't hesitate. "The kind who help people." And with that answer, the Aurora Express was no longer a mystery, it was a mission. They hadn't just found treasure. They'd found their place in a story bigger than themselves, a story of resilience, courage, and family that stretched across generations. The forest seemed to applaud with a rustle of wind through the trees as if approving their choice. But deep down, Eli knew the hardest part was still ahead. They had to decide how to honor this legacy, how to share the truth without letting greed or danger destroy it. And that's where their journey truly begins. Because sometimes the greatest adventures aren't about what you find, but about what you choose to do with it. If this story gripped you the way it gripped me, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because the next chapter of Eli and Leo's incredible discovery is one you will not want to miss.